Hello and welcome to another episode of Debunk the Funk. I'm Dr. Wilson, and joining me today we have Dr. Rob Swanda. Rob, hi, how are you doing?
Hey everyone, great to be here, Dan. Thanks so much for having me.
Of course, your channel, Dr. Rob Swanda on YouTube, is, in my opinion, criminally underrated and deserves a lot more views. But, so I figured I'd have you on and we can talk about just what you do, talk about some misinformation, but also talk about your background and the work that goes into your videos. So how about we start with let's hear a little bit about your background as a scientist and how you actually got into starting science communication.
Absolutely. So it's kind of funny because the way that I got into science communication was kind of an accident, but it's probably like the best accident that's ever happened to me. It's led to a lot of different things that have happened over the course of the past 3 years. So kind of starting out, I was in graduate school at Cornell, getting my PhD in biochemistry, and I was working on different types of therapeutics for a variety of cancers. So I had some work that was being done in the small molecule space, but I also had some work that was being done in the biologic space as well, and that involved the use of a therapeutic called mRNA. This was back in 2016. So this was, we were working on things before anybody really even cared. I have this joke that I tell that I wrote an NSF GRFP proposal all about this work. And some of the comments were really nice. And then there was one reviewer and they're like, this technology I don't think it's going to go anywhere. And it's like, wow, I wonder if they think differently now. But so during that time, exactly. It's always reviewer two. During that time, I began to really get myself familiar with this field and better understand how does mRNA work? Why is it so sensitive? And what is the future benefits of this technology? I was really only looking at it from a cancer lens. How can we use this to maybe make more complex molecules that aren't necessarily able to enter the cell on their own, but if we can enter them as instructions, have the cell build that protein, and then use it as a therapeutic, that would be even better. But then, of course, we had the COVID-19 pandemic begin, and a few months into that pandemic, we heard that there was a few companies that were going to be working on some vaccine technologies. And these technologies focused on the use of mRNA. And so my family actually began asking me some questions about, what is this? Like, I think you've said this before, and they're not scientists. So they kind of were familiar with what the term was because I have always been one to like practice my presentations with family and friends, and they're probably like bored and sleeping, but it helps me. And so they mentioned that it sounds so familiar. Do you know anything about this? And I was like, oh, of course. Like, do you want to know how it works? Do you want to have an explanation? So we were just kind of going over it on a piece of paper. And my mom actually is a hairdresser. So she interacts with a lot of people and a lot of clients. And so she asked, oh, can you record yourself doing that? Because I want to show some of my clients. And I'm like, oh, that's no weird. I don't know if I want to do that. But I ended up saying, okay, let me see what I can put together as more of an educational piece that could not just be used for her, but maybe for a couple other folks, like some friends I could send it to and just kind of get their opinion on it. So I made a whiteboard video inside my lab and drew out how does the mRNA encode for a protein? How can it be used as a vaccine? And why is it beneficial for this COVID-19 pandemic? So I sent it off to her and I sent it off to my friends. And people were giving like good responses. They were like, this is so clear. I finally understand it. Why can't the news show this? I'm like, okay, the news doesn't want to show this. But then I ended up posting it online. So I posted it on Twitter and Instagram, and then just kind of was like, okay, if people want to watch it, great. If they want to be educated, I really didn't know what was going to happen from there. And by the next morning, it was just like millions of views. My phone, I had notifications turned on And it was just, it wouldn't even work because it was so many coming in of just people like sharing or commenting or liking whatever it was on these different platforms. And then I even had a friend reach out to me that says like, oh, people have screen recorded it and they're like sharing it on LinkedIn. I have a family member who sent it through WhatsApp. And I'm like, I think you got the wrong person.
It's amazing.
So that was really my first ever video in science communication. And it just so happened to really go viral because it was necessary at that time. I don't think there was anything particularly special about that video. I think we all do a really good job of helping to break things down, but it was a time where people were eager for information and it just really hit the nail right where people were looking to learn.
That's an amazing story. And I mean, it speaks to your communication abilities to be concise and also utilize the whiteboard, which I think you do really well in all of your videos. Because, you know, for people who are listening might not know, I mean, your videos are almost all like a minute or 2 minutes long. And you always have a whiteboard, you always have great drawings in the back, and you just always hit the necessary points that people need to hear. And so it's like a quick rundown of a pertinent topic that people can learn from. And I think that's great.
And it's like, it's kind of the way that I learn too. So it really helps me because I'm someone who does like to focus on analogies or likes to use really creative visualizations when I'm trying to process a certain topic. I definitely did that. Like when we were trying to learn about organic chemistry or biochemistry, things like that, like it really helped me to visualize what would be going on at such a microscopic level. So that is kind of just like something that has helped me with education. And I think that there are others who learn the same way. So it's really just like a perfect natural fit for me to use those different tools.
Yeah. So you said you were in grad school when this started, right? So I'm curious, what was the reaction of like your advisor and your department to this?
Yeah, so I was actually, so as it was all going on, I was a little bit scared to tell my advisor because we're a lab that we're just really focused on the research, I will say that. So it was something where we didn't really do that much in terms of going out in the public or going out in the community. And this was really something that would be taking away time from doing some experiment, especially in PI's eye. So I actually told him during one of our meetings that, hey, I did this video that was about mRNA explanation and it's getting a lot of attention. Do you want to watch it? And this was of course over Zoom because we weren't having face-to-face meetings at that time. And so he was watching it while I like watching him watch my video. And then at the end, it's like, this is incredible. He's like, let's get, and he said the name of somebody in our lab to translate this into Mandarin. We'll get this out to even more people. And then that kind of sparked the idea of, oh my gosh, like I have friends who know several different languages. I wonder like if they would be interested in translating it. And so we had that Mandarin going on. Then I had a friend who spoke Spanish, and so she ended up dubbing them in Spanish. And then I had a friend who spoke French, and so we ended up doing subtitles in French. And then it just kept expanding, and I think it ended up hitting 7 different languages. And that just, it was one of those things where sometimes you're scared to do something, but then when you do it, it kind of like led to something bigger. So it doesn't always happen that way. I for sure know that, but it was a really nice opportunity that I was scared to do, but then did it, and it led to something bigger.
That's awesome. And it's really great that your advisor was so supportive. Because, I mean, that's a very valid fear that in your advisor's eyes, this is taking away time from the lab, which, I mean, that's not an uncommon attitude in academia with these things. Like, a lot of people who do these kinds of hobbies, it's like their colleagues will say, oh yeah, that's the weird thing they do.
Yeah. And sometimes it's like you may have to hide that from your advisor or your other lab members, that you're doing things that are out in the community, or you're doing these things that are after work or on the weekends, because people might think, well, if you have time to do that, why don't you have time to do more experiments? But it's really like, no, this is something I'm passionate about. It brings me joy. This is the reason why I can come back and do more experiments or push through some of the hard times that we have in lab. So it's definitely a balance.
Yeah, it sparks joy. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it snowballed into a regular thing for you. You now regularly make videos, again, that are all very short and to the point with Whiteboard as a tool. And so has this turned into more of a like career for you, or is it still a side thing?
Yeah, for me, it's still something I do on the side. I do have a career as an engineer, so I work in the medical device field and help with innovation related to new types of medical devices and how we can help get them to individuals who need them. So I would always have these folks that would reach out to me either through a DM, or if they had a private account, they would just send a message that only I could see. And it would be something along the lines of, I watched your video and it helped me make a decision on my health. And so that was really something that stuck with me and something I didn't want to really give up, because it felt like, okay, they trusted me to provide them with accurate information that was clear and concise, that clearly they're not getting from somebody else, or maybe they just don't trust somebody else to seek it out. And so I constantly was just always scouring, like, what are some hot topics that are coming up? There was definitely some additional type of outbreaks that have occurred throughout the US and throughout the world. For example, last year we had Mpox, we had measles, we had even a polio case that popped up in New York. So these were things that I saw popping up. And then immediately, almost, I always saw disinformation or misinformation about them. And I'm like, wow, those people are fast. So let's be faster, or let's try to combat it as well. So it was kind of this personal mission in order to keep bringing about this clear and concise science to folks.
Yeah. And, I asked that question because it just wanted to make the point that, number one, it's pretty hard to have a career in science communication. But also it's really that doing it for the people that your videos actually help, that, keeps you going. But this is a nice segue into what I want to talk about next, which is the disinformation, the misinformation. I mean, your videos don't always, and I would say most often, don't directly address misinformation. They just convey the good information. But you have interacted with the disinformation, I'm sure, as most scientists have, a lot. So what's your thought process when you're making a video on a topic that has a lot of disinformation? Do you think about directly addressing it, or do you just go with the approach of, I want to give you the good information and only the good information?
My approach is definitely the latter. So going for, how does something work? What is it doing inside of your body? And what are the benefits or the negative effects if it's something that should not be taken, that somebody maybe is promoting? So it's really focusing in on this maybe more in-depth chemistry or biochemistry that could be going on, and also breaking down, like, what are particular ingredients maybe that are found in a vaccine, or how does a particular infectious disease actually spread? It's not necessarily going around and saying, okay, this person said this and they're wrong because of this. I want to give somebody the tools that they already know the because. So when they see the disinformation, they don't need me to say that's wrong. They know it's wrong because I've already explained how something should and does work.
Mm-hmm. And that's beautiful. I love that approach. It's not what I do, but I think that approach is very much needed because, that's the basic education that people need to defend themselves against misinformation. And I think you do that quite well.
Yeah, I love the way that you're able to combat the misinformation and really also break it down and say, like, this part is wrong because of this and this part is wrong because of that. And for me, it's like providing that because that you do. So it's like this synergy that we're able to work together, I think, and hopefully it's helping multiple people around the world to also either combat the misinformation or just know that's wrong and just keep scrolling by.
Right, right. Because I think we do need more people like you who are going to take the time to do science communication. And, your videos aren't long, but it does take work. And so, not to discourage scientists out there from trying to do this kind of communication in whatever medium they might want to do it in, but how much work goes into your videos?
I would say several hours per video definitely goes in. Sometimes the topics are more relevant to what I already know. So that's also helpful. For example, I did a video that was related to amino acids a couple months ago, and it was really just breaking down, okay, what are the essential versus non-essential amino acids? And really this kind of spurred because I got ticked off, but I kept seeing some misinformation in like the supplement industry. And I was like, okay, let's just like talk about what are amino acids. Like they're really not this like super food that people are trying to claim they are. But so that one was quite easy for me because I have a biochemistry background.
Yeah.
I have memorized the 20 essential amino acids, some of the other that are amino acids that are not so commonly found that are incorporated into proteins as well. And it was like, okay, I can still draw these out. Thanks a lot, like Biochem 302. That really helped me. And so that one took less time, but there are other topics sometimes that take a lot of time. For example, there was a new drug that just came out called Zurzuvae that is for women who have postpartum depression. I don't know anything about postpartum depression from my training, but I do know how to go through the literature. I do know how to evaluate an FDA submission, and I can see, okay, how does this drug work and why does this drug work? So that one took more time because I needed to do the background research and then figure out, okay, how am I going to piece this video together? And then it also took me probably like a half an hour to figure out how do I say Zurzuvae. So that's also another challenge sometimes. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of time that goes into the prep work. And then additionally, I always have the filming. And even though when I post the video, it's always in one take, it usually never takes one take. It's usually several takes. I always thought like maybe I should have kept my blooper reel or something and post that one day. I think that a lot of them I've deleted because I was embarrassed, but we'll see. Maybe that will come eventually. And then there's the editing, of course. And then finally, like the posting and making sure that you want to post it the right way too. How do I want to advertise this in the simplest way? Again, for me, it's all about like, okay, here's a simple statement on what this video is going to be about. And maybe here's like 2 sentences or so in the description or accompanied with the tweet. Sometimes I'll include a link to, say, like CDC website or the FDA website if it's something new, like, oh, this just came out, or here's some additional precautions you can take or additional tips and tricks that these government agencies have put together. But after all that's said and done, it's definitely a hefty amount of work just for one to 2 minute video.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that's important to acknowledge because, I mean, I think I started to realize that a while ago when I thought about trying to make TikToks, and I was like, okay, maybe I should try to make more of those because that seems fun and that platform seems like a good opportunity to reach more people who might not have heard this stuff before and could prepare themselves against the disinformation. But even just planning that or trying to come up with how I would do it, it's like, this is really hard. So it is a skill to be able to fit good information into a short form content.
But on the other side too, your content is longer and you're taking a ton of time to actually go through other people's videos and then make the comments on this particular section. So that I can't imagine how much longer that takes and the steps that are involved in that as well.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely takes several hours as well, but it depends on the kind of video. If I'm doing a video on a Joe Rogan interview, that's a 3-hour interview I have to listen to. And I'll listen to it on like 1.5 times speed to make it like, an hour and 45 minutes instead of 3 hours, but that's still a lot of time. Then I got to cut it up into bits that I can address and then make sure I have all the primary literature to address each point. And then when I'm finally comfortable with what I want to address and how my sources, then I have to film, edit that. And it's a lot. And
Definitely.
I also go through a lot of starting and restarting what I'm trying to say because I don't write a script. I just talk. I let my sources guide what I want to say. And that's a lot of starting, restarting, stumbling over words, trying to reword things on the spot. But everyone finds their own way to do it. And I think you're a good example of a situation where you didn't know that this is something that you were good at, but you just tried it. And it ended up being something really good for you. Did you have any inklings of science communication before that?
So in terms of science communication, not exactly. I am always the type of person, though, who is eager to present my work. So in grad school, I would be like, yeah, I'll give the presentation, or yeah, sign me up for another seminar to showcase my work. And people knew that. And my friends were always like, you are crazy. Why do you want to keep presenting? And I just enjoy it. I enjoy being up there on the platform, whether it's to an audience of 10 people or if there's 100 people that are and just sharing the work that we do. And I think it's a great way to also bounce off ideas, especially when you're in graduate school and you're trying a bunch of different things for your project. You get so many different perspectives when you can share your work. So presenting was always an interest of mine. And I knew of some people who were doing science communication, but they were doing it in very different ways. And I think that's the really cool thing about science communication is that you and I, we do videos, and even our videos are very different. But there's folks who are out there and they're doing artwork, or they're going out and they're doing some type of cartoon work, animation. And these are completely different styles and something that I wouldn't be good at. But it's really cool that people can leverage what they are passionate about and combine that with their passion for science communication as well. So I think that when people ask me like, oh, if I want to do science communication and how do I get better at presenting? I always tell them, well, if you want to present, you want to be someone who's on camera, or if you want to be someone who's in front of a live audience, things like that, then sure, like I can give you presentation tips. But if you're really good at something else, science communication can go far beyond just even posting a video of yourself. I mean, you can even just post text. You can make cool visuals and just post like almost like an inspirational quote that's giving a science fact of the day. That is science communication as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, you're right. I mean, I think people think of science communication and they think blogging or making videos or things like that, but it can take a bunch of different forms. And I hope that more scientists at any stage start doing more of it, whether they're PhD level or postdocs or even professors. I hope more start doing science communication because it's very much needed.
I agree. And I think that one thing that would be really beneficial for the field too is getting that support from advisors or from your committee members in academia, especially, because I think that that's when people really begin to tap into these different alternative fields. And again, maybe it just becomes a passion of theirs and they're still going to work in industry or they're going to work in academia, but they do some things on the side. Maybe it's science policy, maybe it's science communication, whatever it is. But if you're not getting that support from higher up, you're going to be discouraged from doing it. So I think that if there are people who are in higher up positions, making that part of someone's like evaluation plan or taking that into account when somebody is going through their qualification exam and things like that. Of course, the science is the most important part of a PhD, but there is additional part that involves how do we bring that science out to other people? We can't just keep it locked in a box by ourselves and we're the only ones who understand it. So I think that mentorship and that approval really needs to start from high up in academia, or it's just going to continue to have harder barriers and it's going to keep discouraging people from entering.
Right. I agree. I agree. As someone whose advisor wasn't the most supportive in doing anything outside the lab, I totally agree. But so I wanted to ask about, misinformation, because that's what happens. That's what we do on this channel. We talk about misinformation. So I wanted to ask, just doesn't have to be COVID pandemic related, but what is the one bit of misinformation that bugs you the most as a scientist?
To me, it's really when you can tell that someone is targeting populations that unfortunately do not know. And that can come from anything like trying to sell something. If they're trying to make money, I think that's terrible, on something that is not going to work, that it's just like a false information, or it's just some type of, I don't even know what the right word is. It's just there you go. It's just some scam. That is, I think, the hardest thing to watch, because I don't believe that folks who are not in the field are always purposely trying to spread misinformation. And I think that that's why a lot of the time I do come at it from an angle of, here's how things work, rather than here's why someone else is wrong. Because I want to help them better understand science as a whole. If they're falling typically for this misinformation or this scam, I'm pretty sure they probably do not have education in the science field, which is totally fine. I could fall to an easy scam in fields that are way outside of my expertise as well. That's no diss on anybody, because I'm not an expert in those things, and we're all experts in different ways. So that's what hurts me the most, is when you see people who are unintentionally falling for things and then they end up spreading it further into their circles as well, because I don't necessarily think that they're the bad one, and they're not the bad seed at the end of the day. They're just unfortunately an outcome of somebody who was purposely trying to spread that misinformation.
Yeah, totally. It definitely, there are definitely different levels of misinformation spreaders. I talked to Desiree Townsend a few weeks ago, who is an example of one of those people who was in a situation where they were just vulnerable to the misinformation. And then they ended up spreading it by believing it, essentially, because they were just in that position where they were suffering, and someone offered them a solution and an answer that wasn't true, but they didn't know any better. So yeah, it is quite common, and it does bother me as well, because most of society just doesn't understand a lot about science, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But those are all people that, the actual disinformation sellers can prey upon.
Yeah.
Is there anybody in your life or any situations that you can think of, that you immediately think of when you think of people who have been affected by disinformation?
Yeah, absolutely. There are times where I've posted videos, and I've even had my own friends or my own family be like, why are you doing this? Or like, that is not what I saw on this, or that's not what I heard here. I think that you should take it down. And for me, it was this journey, I think, of, okay, I know that this information is benefiting more people than the folks who I might want to try to accommodate by taking it down. So it's this unfortunate balancing act of like cutting losses with people who no longer believe in you or trust what you're saying, because you're passionate about something else and knowing that it's making a difference elsewhere. So I think that that's been something that was hard in the beginning. of making the series, but has definitely become not as existent anymore as it's continued to now, more than 200 videos. So I can stand proudly and say that those 200 videos have really made a big difference in the world. And sometimes you have to lose things in order to gain success.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
totally. And with that success come trolls. So
absolutely.
yeah, I mean, do you want to talk about how you deal with them? Because I've seen a little bit of it, and I think it's pretty funny.
I think for me, the dealing with trolls and spam accounts, or maybe they are real people and they just are a little not, they're exposed to the misinformation too much.
Mm-hmm.
I just find it funny to use humor to I find it funny to use humor to volley back and forth with them. So kind of commenting on something that somebody was saying about me of like, oh, well, I hope that you are injected with this toxin. Say, oh, well, okay, well, are you at least gonna take me to dinner first? Something like silly like that. Like, am I gonna change that person's mind? Probably not.
Mm-hmm.
So there's really no point in me, I think, of providing information or sending them a link to a video because I just don't see that benefit. It could be there, but for me, it's just easier to kind of volley, play with them. I get a laugh out of it. I think that's the best way to deal with hateful comments and trolls because it does hurt. And you do read all the comments. I mean, people say, oh, don't read the comments. But it's like, okay, you read every comment. At least I do. So if you do.
Yeah, I mean that's a great way to deal with it because yeah, it can be a time sink to engage with trolls, and if you're just not invested, making it funny, then that is what I would recommend, but it's not what I do, and I wish I did.
But I think that that's something that's also been nice about building this community is that I've had hateful comments come in or misinformation comments come in. And before I even have a chance to respond, I already have people who follow me or who are just associated with the account. They're commenting back being like, nope, you're wrong. Or, don't say that to him. Like, get out of here. This isn't for you. And that actually is really nice. Like, for me, seeing that people have banded together and are willing to defend someone, like they don't know me, they know me online, but they don't know, and they're helping me or protecting me, that it means a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. The community, the science communication community is really good because
definitely
partly because we get a lot of trolls and a lot of hate and harassment, and so we kind of stick together and support each other, and that's really nice. So what's so I guess another question I wanted to ask is what's a misinformed claim that you hear really often that just makes your eyes roll?
The thing that I hear the most, and the thing that has drove people to my YouTube channel a lot, is that the COVID vaccines contain graphene oxide. Wow. Or like, I'm like, people realize that is a dark material.
Yeah.
And vaccine is clear. Like, if you are getting a vaccine and it's dark, like don't take it. I'm all for that, but that's not what it looks like. So I think that one, it really just was like mind-boggling to me when that came out, because I'm like, really? You think that there's literal pieces of graphene inside? And then it's getting me thinking, like, do you know about needle clogging? Do you know about container closure integrity? Do you know about all these things that are assessed, and that if that was even remotely in there, like, there's no way it could actually go through? So that one just, it had me baffled, and then it just really got me irritated because it just doesn't make sense. There's a lot that doesn't make sense, but that just really doesn't make sense to me. And then now the most recent one that I've been seeing people drive to my channel also about, and for folks who are on YouTube, who are searching videos on YouTube, the creators can see top search terms that are driving traffic to their videos. So that's what I will look at sometimes. And now all of a sudden people are saying that there's a Marburg virus inside of the vaccine and that it's going to be activated in October. But very specifically, they'll wait until October, and then it's gonna launch. And so that one just, to me, I'm like, I don't know, like, are people doing it for just clicks and they want this kind of crazy conspiracy to blow up because so then they blow up? Like, I don't know, maybe they don't care about their own image. I really don't know when sometimes like those things pop up. Like, it's so out there that doesn't make any logical sense that just
Yeah. I mean, it's like with something like that, where do you start? You kind of have to start from the basics. Like, okay, what is a virus, and how does a viral genome work? How does a viral life cycle work? And then what is a Marburg virus, and does it work in any way that would remotely make it activatable at a certain date? And by how? By which method?
Yeah. They said 5G tower.
Oh, of course. Okay. Right. Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Right.
Yeah, it's so bizarre. But you had a video about Marburg virus, which
Exactly
might have been attracting that traffic.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, with claims like that, I think the people who make them and initiate them, they have to know better.
Yeah.
But then the people who hear it, they don't know what a Marburg virus is. They don't know how 5G works. They don't know how, like, vaccines work, because how are you going to put a Marburg virus in a vaccine without anybody knowing? That's ridiculous. And they get scared and they believe it.
Right.
Because probably the person who initiated that myth has letters in front of their name, and they think, well, why would I not trust them? So it's really unfortunate, but hopefully they're learning from your Marburg virus video.
Exactly. If they're clicking on it, they're learning exactly what it is, how it's transmitted.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. And the funny thing is, I did that video so long ago, maybe 8-9 months ago, when there was the Marburg virus that was happening in Africa. And so I made it because there was comments about, like, oh, Marburg virus spreading and blah blah blah. It's like, no, it's really not like the same thing as a respiratory virus, but let's talk about how does it spread, or why is it so localized, or why are we keeping it localized? And now it's like getting attention, but for the wrong reasons, unfortunately. But yeah, hopefully they're learning something.
Yeah. It's like, I have this joke in my head where there's a character of a perfectionist academic who is working for years on a paper, and he's like, he doesn't want to publish. No, it's not ready. All his colleagues are encouraging him, you need to finish, you need to publish. And then he finally publishes, and the next morning it gets all this attention, but it's for the complete wrong reason, and he's so frustrated. Like, yeah, that's not what my research says.
Exactly.
Because yeah, I mean, that it always happens in science, where a paper will get published in, of course, the primary literature, and it means one thing to everybody who reads it in the primary source, then it gets reported on by a secondary source and a tertiary source and so on. And each step out, it just strays a little bit further away from what the paper actually said.
Yep, for sure.
And so it's funny that it ends with your video.
No, exactly. But I think that you bringing up the papers is a really good point, because it also tends to lead to misinformation, because folks don't always necessarily know how to review a paper or what even is a peer-reviewed paper.
Mm-hmm.
There's been times where I've posted videos and they're like, oh, this is wrong because of this article, and I Substack dot blah blah blah. That, and I'm not like trying to be mean. I always am like, that's not peer reviewed. That is someone's opinion piece. Nope, blah 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 said it. They published this. It's a yes, they published it because they hit publish. I can do the same thing on my website too. It doesn't mean it's peer reviewed. So I think that's something that can be tough to combat. I think you do a really good job, because you are always bringing in that literature and breaking it down for folks to understand, because that you and I know the scientific literature is not always clear. It's not written as science communication. It's written as deep, in-depth science with complex formulations and different equations. So it's not always necessarily user-friendly, but the way that you're able to incorporate it to combat that misinformation is really perfect. And it really hits the nail on the head.
I appreciate that. And that is one of my goals, because I remember when I was writing my first author paper that contained most of my dissertation work, it's, as you know, it's just a really long, arduous process. And toward the end of it, I remember there was one day I looked at my abstract and I read it, and I thought, what percentage of the planet would read this abstract and understand what I'm saying? Probably like only a few hundred people on the planet, because my field was pretty niche even for molecular biology. And that was depressing to me. I was like, yeah, why do we write science papers only for scientists and then just call it quits and have no responsibility to like make sure that the taxpayers who funded our research actually get it. And so, yeah, it's frustrating how it's kind of by design. Scientific papers have to be written for scientists, and not for the lay people, but it causes so much confusion. So yeah, breaking down papers and making sure people understand them is definitely one of my goals. I'm thinking that there might need to be a video on how to read papers eventually.
I agree. I would support that one.
Yeah. But speaking of future plans, what are some of the immediate topics that you're hoping to cover, if you want to reveal them?
Yeah, so I am hoping to cover a couple different things. There's some newer types of technologies that are still coming out, newer types of delivery mechanisms for advanced therapeutics. So I would love to be able to cover those and kind of be ahead of whatever the next therapeutic is going to be. And the reason I say that is because when the mRNA vaccines came out, again, that was a new technology that had never been on the market before. It had been studied for so long, but just nothing had been approved. And it's similar to all types of things. Like we just recently in the past few years had the first oncolytic virus that was, do people actually know what that is? Maybe not. But I think if we can explain some things that are going to be entering the pipeline, so maybe they're in phase 2, phase 3 clinical trials, and they're a newer type of molecule that hasn't yet been explored, then if I can get ahead of the curve, explain it, people will be more aware and they won't be as susceptible to some types of misinformation when it comes out. That's the goal. So definitely hitting that new type of therapeutic space. I also want to hit some things related to thyroid conditions and metabolism. So those are things that are kind of in my wheelhouse. I'm also close to my heart. So I want to kind of begin touching on some of those topics in the next couple of months as well.
I really like that idea of uh, one term for it, I guess, is pre-bunking stuff. Where
Debunking.
yeah,
Look at that.
where you like anticipate, okay, I think that people are going to be misinterpreting this if it were to ever go viral or be a hot button issue in the media. So I'm going to talk about that so that when it does, my resource is there ready to go. I mean, that is a strategy that I think debunkers have been talking about for a while, but I haven't heard a lot about it lately. So that's great that you're doing that.
Yeah. And I think that that's one of the things that, it takes a little bit more time too, because you're now having to do this market type of research where what could be potentially popular and is it going to enter the market? That was one thing that actually hit really well the past few months is I did one on the RSV vaccine. Even though it wasn't a new technology, I was kind of like, ooh, like this could be one that folks might not want to, be complacent with. So let's just talk about what is this going to be. And I did that one. And then like now it's been popping off. So it's kind of funny. Sometimes it doesn't quite hit when it's launched, but like now it's really picking up more speed. So that's okay for me. It's not always about like how well does it do. It's just more so people are understanding and learning. And that was like kind of the first instance that I saw that type of approach work well. So let's try it again.
That's awesome. So I'm curious, working in industry myself, what do you think the next big therapeutic is going to be? Or just one impactful one that people might not know about yet?
Yeah, I think that the carrier space of different drugs is huge, right? So I've been fortunate to be able to learn and understand more about different types of drug carriers because I myself was designing my own lipid. And one thing that I think folks don't always understand about lipid nanoparticles is that we can modify them too. So just because it worked in one instance doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to work in another. And a lot of that is really driving to the liver. Now, people who are part of Misinformation will tell you otherwise, but it's not true. If you are taking lipid nanoparticles, whether it's for a vaccine or whether it's for the other approved drug that uses siRNA technology for that, majority of it is ending up in your liver. And there's been some innovations going on maybe we can put some receptors on the outside of nanoparticles and help them go exactly where we need them, specifically for, say, like a cancer treatment. Can we get them to go to that tumor and actually release their cargo right there by the tumor? So I think that we might see some innovation coming out soon related in the carrier space. So it's kind of building off of what we already know. That's a really cool area that I'm interested in. And then, of course, anything that's related to cell and gene therapy, that one's always really nice because it's like personalized medicine almost, where you're really getting to the core of what's going to work for somebody's biology, where it might not work for the entire population's biology. So anytime I see things that are innovating in that space, it's always an area to talk about.
Yeah, definitely the CAR T and gene therapy space is popular.
Yeah.
And hopefully we do see some cool new drugs coming out in those spaces. And
yeah,
your videos will be waiting.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we have things like T-cell engagers, things that are, or bispecific antibodies. I did a video on antibody drug conjugates, which are close to those, but those things are also evolving. So that's like super cool. And it always touches in, majority of the time in oncology, which I think is so needed. We've been talking about them. We've been hearing about that for so long. I know I've been hearing about it for like 2 decades, even before I was in the sciences field. Oh, chemotherapy just kills everything off. Like we got to find something better from family members, from folks who, they weren't doctors, but they knew. And, here we are many years later, and it's still kind of the norm. So having these advanced type of therapeutics could really improve patient health and well-being in the future.
Yeah, I think, science goes through phases of exploring different things. I think for a while, cancer therapeutics were excited about kinase inhibitors after the success of Gleevec. People were really excited about making more drugs like that because that works amazingly well. I mean, it's incredible how a disease as horrible as chronic myelogenous leukemia is practically cured with Gleevec. I mean, it's amazing, but it turns out that, that's a special situation with a very weird enzyme, and it's probably not going to work the same way for a lot of other cancers. And now they're exploring new options. And
Yep.
So yeah, it's really cool. I love how these things evolve over time.
Yeah, me too.
But I'm happy to have your videos around to give the quick explainers on these things so that when they do get approved and start helping patients, that people can be sure that they do actually help and know how they work.
Right.
So I think we're getting to the end of this, but Dr. Rob Swanda, I've really enjoyed having you here. Is there any last advice that you want to give to any aspiring science communicators out there?
I wish that I had this magical answer in order to say, how can we solve disinformation? Unfortunately, I don't think that that's maybe something that will ever happen, but I think that if you're interested in the space, if you're educating even just one other person, that is making a difference. So don't always necessarily focus on numbers. You never know where that information might go, even like by word of mouth. One person might tell another, they'll tell their circle, etc. So if you're looking to enter the field, use your own creativity, whatever works for you. You don't have to do it in terms of public speaking. We talked about a variety of other avenues that you can go into, and just put yourself out there. I think being authentic and being true to yourself and being what works for you is really going to shine through your science communication, and that's what's going to draw people in and want to keep tuning back.
Awesome. And so you have a YouTube channel, Dr. Rob Swanda. You're also on Instagram, same name?
Not really for science communication. I used to, but then kind of stopped there. Yeah.
Is it just
mainly
now?
Just YouTube and Twitter. Yeah.
Gotcha. All right.
Yeah, or I don't even know.
Oh, well.
I don't know what to call it.
Twitter's terrible.
Exactly. So YouTube is good. Yeah.
Twitter's terrible, but it's where the crazies are. So
I know. And I did try TikTok for a little while, but like it just kept taking up so much storage on my phone that I had to stop. It's like a terrible reason, but yeah.
Oh yeah, I get it. So anyway, people, if you're interested in seeing Rob's videos, go to the YouTube channel, Dr. Rob Swanda. It's going to be linked in the description below. Rob, great having you, and keep doing what you're doing. I think it's great.
Thank you so much. It was my pleasure to be here, and hopefully we'll have a chance to talk again in the near future.
Awesome. Definitely. Keep in touch.
Sounds great. Thank you.